First contact's shock. The grand amphitheater of the Galactic Concordat sparkled like a jewel carved from living starlight. High Admiral Vorthax of the Luminary felt his bioluminescent scales pulse with barely contained irritation as he watched the latest presentation on peaceful exploration vessel designs. The Concordat's 897th Annual Ship Design Symposium had devolved into the same tired arguments about minimizing military capability that plagued every gathering of spacefaring species. As you can see, Ambassador Nixis of the Silicon Consciousness droned on, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns meant to convey supreme confidence. Our latest exploration vessel design completely eliminates any systems that could be repurposed for combat. We've achieved true enlightenment in engineering. Vorthax's scales flickered a pattern that translated roughly to cosmic-level nonsense. After 3 centuries serving as humanity's primary contact with the galactic community, he'd learned that true enlightenment usually meant willful blindness. The massive hologram floating above the amphitheater showed a sleek vessel that looked about as practical as a soap bubble in a solar storm. Before Vorthax could voice his concerns, a new signal chimed through the chamber's quantum communications array. Incoming transmission from unregistered vessel, announced the Concordat's AI. Origin, Sol System. Classification, Human Space Force. The assembled representatives of 50 spacefaring civilizations shifted uncomfortably. Humans weren't due at the symposium for another 3 standard cycles. Their early arrival could only mean request permission to present alternative perspective on ship design. Came a calm human voice, carrying undertones of what Vorthax had learned to recognize as careful amusement. HMS Nightweaver standing by. Ambassador Nixis's crystalline form vibrated with indignation. The humans weren't invited to this session. Their primitive fixation on military capability. The words died in her speech synthesizer as the Nightweaver dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Concordat station. The vessel's arrival wasn't announced by the usual flash of light or gravitational distortion. Instead, space itself seemed to whisper aside, like a curtain drawn back by an invisible hand. The human ship hung against the backdrop of stars like a predator poised mid-strike. Its hull, composed of materials that made the station's sensors stutter in confusion, seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Geometric patterns that hurt the eye to follow pulsed along its surface, and what looked like gardens could be glimpsed through transparent sections of the hull. Impossible, whispered a representative of the quantum collective, their probability clouds contracting in shock. Those hull patterns, they're solving differential equations in real time. Greetings, Concordat, came the human voice again. Captain Regina Blackwood commanding. We couldn't help but overhear your discussion on ship design philosophy. Perhaps we could offer a demonstration of alternative approaches. Vorthax's scales rippled with anticipation. He tried warning the Concordat about humanity's unique approach to technology, about their habit of turning scientific principles into art and art into weapons, and somehow maintaining libraries and gardens in their warships without seeing any contradiction. The human vessel is armed, announced the station's AI, managing to sound both fascinated and alarmed, detecting multiple weapon systems of unknown configuration, also detecting 3,000 personnel, including families, a full xenobiology research wing, and what appears to be a symphony orchestra. Ambassador Nix's crystalline form clouded with confusion. Families? Orchestra? On a warship? Of course, Captain Blackwood replied, warm amusement now clear in her voice. The Nightweaver is humanity's home among the stars. We find that combining military precision with civilian creativity produces unique advantages. For instance, our children's quantum mechanics class recently developed an interesting theory about your station's shield harmonics. Would you care for an analysis? The Concordat erupted in overlapping waves of communication as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just refused to choose between military power and civilian advancement. They'd found a way to make each strengthen the other. Vorthax watched with growing satisfaction as the Nightweaver began a series of maneuvers that somehow managed to be both a tactical display and a dance. His scales flickered a pattern that only he could see, one that meant about time. The galaxy was about to learn what he'd known for centuries. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their warships. It was their refusal to accept artificial limitations, their insistence on finding beauty in power and strength in creativity. The show was just beginning. The demonstration, the Nightweaver's observation deck, defied every convention of warship design the Concordat representatives had ever encountered. Instead of austere metal walls and utilitarian displays, they found themselves in what appeared to be a botanical garden. Massive windows looked out into space through what Ambassador Nixus's sensors indicated was somehow stronger than any known transparent material. The garden serves multiple purposes, Captain Blackwood explained as she led the delegation past flowering plants from 100 worlds. Her dark skin contrasted with the white of her uniform, which seemed to shift patterns subtly as she moved. Beyond oxygen generation and food production, we found that maintaining connection with living things improves both crew performance and combat effectiveness. Combat effectiveness. A member of the quantum collective pulsed with confusion, their probability cloud rippling. How does gardening improve military capability? Before Blackwood could answer, alarms blared through the ship. Red light bathed the garden, but none of the crew members present showed any sign of panic. Instead, they moved with practiced grace to predetermined positions. Excellent timing, Blackwood smiled. Combat demonstration, all hands. Standard protocol Omega. The garden transformed. Plants shifted, revealing concealed weapon stations. But instead of crude military interfaces, the control surfaces were works of art, covered in flowing designs that seemed to move under their own power. These designs, Ambassador Nixus vibrated with sudden recognition, their fractal targeting algorithms. Indeed, confirmed Lieutenant Commander Rashid, the ship's tactical officer, as his fingers danced across the living interface. We found that merging artistic patterns with mathematical precision improved reaction times by 300%. The human mind processes beauty more quickly than raw data. Through the vast windows, the delegation watched as training drones deployed from the Nightweaver's hull. Each drone was a terror in its own right, capable of overwhelming most species' defensive systems. They attacked in waves, employing tactics that should have been impossible to counter. The Nightweaver's response left the observers speechless. The massive warship moved like a dancer, each motion flowing into the next. Energy weapons fired in patterns that created harmonics in space itself, turning defense into a symphony of light and power. The ship's quantum shields pulsed in rhythm with music that seemed to emerge from the very walls. Are your shields synchronized with your orchestra? Illuminary scientists' scales flashed patterns of disbelief. The Nightweaver's Symphony Orchestra. Blackwood nodded. They discovered that certain musical compositions could enhance our shield harmonics. We've since integrated arts programming into all our combat systems. A holographic display showed the ship's internal activity. In one section, children attended classes while contributing to the ship's computational network through educational games. In another, civilians conducted scientific research that fed directly into the tactical systems. Every aspect of life aboard the vessel served multiple purposes, all flowing together in perfect harmony. Impossible, Ambassador Nixus declared, her crystalline form clouding with confusion. Our studies show that military efficiency requires focus, specialization. This chaos should not function. That's humanity's secret, Vorthax interjected, his scales pulsing with what might have been pride. They don't see chaos. They see patterns within patterns, connections where we see only barriers. They've turned their entire ship into a living expression of their culture. The demonstration reached its climax as the Nightweaver executed a maneuver that bent space in ways the observer's mind struggled to process. The training drones were neutralized not through brute force, but through a complex dance of gravity fields, energy pulses, and precisely calculated trajectories that seemed more like an art performance than a military exercise. Terminal effect achieved. Lieutenant Commander Rashid reported calmly. All targets neutralized. Children's choir performance contributed to a 7% improvement in shield harmonics. Engineering reports the garden's biomass helped absorb excess energy from the new quantum drive configuration. Captain Blackwood turned to the stunned delegation. This is merely a basic demonstration. The Nightweaver represents our attempt to move beyond the false dichotomy between military power and civilian advancement. Every system, every person aboard serves multiple roles, creating a whole greater than the sum of its parts. A young ensign approached, carrying what appeared to be a piece of artwork created by one of the ship's children. Looking closer, the delegates realized with shock that the child's drawing contained calculations for a new type of quantum shield modulation. Perhaps now, Blackwood suggested gently, we can discuss ship design philosophy from a more comprehensive perspective. The Quantum Collective's representative had to recalibrate their probability cloud 3 times before speaking. You're not just showing us a new type of warship, you're showing us a new way of existing in space. Precisely. Blackwood's smile held centuries of human innovation and the promise of more to come. We call it integrated evolution. The real question is, are you ready to evolve with us? As if to emphasize her words, the garden around them subtly shifted, plants moving in response to the ship's computational needs, while through the windows, stars seemed to dance in harmony with human ingenuity. The galaxy would never be the same. Hidden threats emerge. The diplomatic reception aboard the Concordat station had barely begun when the Nightweaver's quantum arrays detected the first anomaly. Captain Blackwood, engaged in explaining the principles of combat ballet to a fascinated group of luminary scientists, felt the subtle vibration through her neural link before any external alarm sounded. Interesting timing, she murmured, sharing a knowing look with High Admiral Vorthax, whose scales had already shifted to alert patterns. The station's AI remained silent, its sensors still blind to what the Nightweaver had detected. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Rashid's voice came through her neural link, calm but urgent. The children's quantum art class picked up gravitational distortions in Sector 7. Pattern matches the Void Hunters. The assembled diplomats continued their discussions, unaware of the deadly dance about to unfold. The Void Hunters were supposed to be a myth, a horror story told to young spacers, beings that lived in the spaces between reality, emerging only to feed on advanced civilizations. How many? Blackwood subvocalized, maintaining her pleasant expression. 7 capital ships, Captain. They're using the station's own quantum wake to mask their approach. Clever. Our 3rd-grade physics class actually predicted this vulnerability last week. Before Blackwood could respond, Ambassador Nix's crystalline form suddenly vibrated with alarm. Her species' natural sensitivity to quantum fluctuations had finally detected what the Nightweaver systems had been tracking for minutes. Impossible, she chimed in distress. The barrier between dimensions. The space around the station twisted. Reality itself seemed to tear as massive shapes emerged from what looked like tears in the fabric of spacetime. The Void Hunters' ships defied conventional physics, their hulls composed of what appeared to be solidified darkness. The station's AI finally reacted, but its warning came far too late. Multiple hostile entities detected. Station defenses offline. Unknown interference pattern detected. Captain Blackwood's polite diplomatic smile transformed into something older, something that remembered Earth's long history of warfare. Nightweaver, execute Symphony Protocol. All civilians to creative combat stations. Deploy the Mozart defense. The human warship's response was immediate and breathtaking. Its hull, which had appeared merely elegant before, began to shift and flow. The gardens visible through its transparent sections pulsed with bioluminescence, each plant contributing to the ship's computational network. What are you doing? Ambassador Nixis demanded, her form flickering with panic. The station's quantum shields are failing. We need to evacuate. No, Blackwood replied calmly. What you need is to watch and learn. Lieutenant Commander, is the children's choir in position? Yes, Captain. They're already harmonizing with the shield frequencies. The Void Hunters struck first, launching weapons that seemed to be made of concentrated void, designed to erase matter from existence. They had destroyed countless civilizations this way, expecting the same easy victory. What they encountered instead defied their eons of experience. The Night Weaver's response began with music. The ship's children's choir, accompanied by the full orchestra, began performing what sounded like a classical Earth composition. But embedded in the music were quantum harmonics that made Ambassador Nyx's crystalline form resonate in astonishment. They're using sound to manipulate quantum fields, she whispered in awe. The music isn't just music, it's a weapon. The Void weapons met a defense grid unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Night Weaver's shields didn't just block the attacks, they transformed them. Each point of impact became a swirling display of light and energy, the ship's defense systems turning warfare into art. Full combat deployment, Blackwood commanded. Show them what humanity has learned about the dance between creation and destruction. The Night Weaver's hull opened like a blooming flower. What had appeared to be decorative patterns revealed themselves as nested weapon systems, each designed with an artist's eye and an engineer's precision. But instead of mere destruction, each system worked in concert to create something new. Target their dimensional anchors, Rashid called out. The 6th grade quantum physics class identified their weak points during yesterday's art therapy session. The Void Hunters, encountering resistance for the first time in millennia, responded with increasing violence. They launched attacks that should have annihilated the human vessel instantly. Instead, the Night Weaver absorbed each attack, its hybrid systems transforming the energy into fuel for its own defenses. Fascinating, the Quantum Collective's representative observed, their probability cloud expanding with new calculations. They're not just fighting. They're creating a new form of reality manipulation through combat. Captain Blackwood nodded, her eyes tracking the battle with practiced ease. Humanity learned long ago that the greatest victories don't come from destruction alone. Every act of violence can be transformed into an act of creation if you understand the underlying patterns. As if to demonstrate her words, the Night Weaver executed a series of maneuvers that seemed to defy physics itself. Each movement was precisely calculated to create interference patterns in the fabric of space-time, turning the Void Hunters' own dimensional manipulation against them. The gardens are at 120% efficiency, Rashid reported. The battle flowers are blooming early. They're responding to the quantum fluctuations. The children's latest art project just provided a breakthrough in void energy containment. The combined delegates of the Galactic Concordat watched in stunned silence as humanity's approach to warfare rewrote their understanding of reality itself. This wasn't just combat. It was evolution in action, a demonstration of what happened when a species refused to accept the traditional boundaries between war and peace, art and science, creation and destruction. The Void Hunters were about to learn what so many others had learned before. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their strength, but their ability to transform any challenge into an opportunity for growth. Battle Symphony. The void between stars became a canvas for humanity's unique form of warfare. As the Night Weaver engaged the Void Hunters, the gathered representatives of the Galactic Concordat witnessed combat evolve into art, and art transform into something entirely new. Quantum resonance at critical threshold, Lieutenant Commander Rashid announced, his fingers dancing across interfaces that pulsed with living light. The children's quantum art installation is predicting their next dimensional shift. The largest of the Void Hunter vessels, a behemoth of twisted space-time that the crew had nicknamed Dark Symphony, launched what should have been a devastating attack. Tendrils of pure nothingness reached out to erase the Night Weaver from existence. Captain Blackwood's response shocked even High Admiral Vorthax, whose scales flickered with patterns never before recorded in luminary history. Deploy the Shakespeare Protocol. Full theatrical engagement. The Nightweaver's hull began to transform, but not in any way the alien observers could have predicted. The gardens visible through the transparent sections shifted, plants moving in carefully choreographed patterns that generated complex gravitational fields. Throughout the ship, crew members began reciting classical human literature in perfect synchronization. To be, or not to be, echoed through the ship's quantum communication network, each word carrying encoded battle commands. The vessel's movement patterns shifted to match the rhythm of ancient iambic pentameter. They're using poetry as a combat algorithm. Ambassador Nix's vibrated in disbelief. The verbal patterns are creating quantum interference waves. The Void Hunters' attack met not just shields or countermeasures, but a complex web of cultural expression turned into defensive technology. Shakespeare's sonnets, translated into quantum equations, created shield harmonics that the ancient hunters couldn't penetrate. Multiple dimension breach attempts detected, Rashid reported. The elementary school's interpretive dance class is calculating intercept patterns. Through the observation windows, the delegates watched as young human children moved in precise formations, their movements somehow translating directly into the Nightweaver's defensive patterns. Each dance step corresponded to a shift in the ship's quantum field configuration. Impossible, the quantum collective's representative pulsed. They've weaponized interpretive dance. Not weaponized, Blackwood corrected, her eyes tracking multiple battle displays simultaneously. Integrated. There's a difference. Show them the back maneuver. The ship's orchestra, which had been providing what seemed like background music, suddenly shifted into a new composition. The notes of Bach's toccata and fugue in D minor rippled through space itself, each musical phrase triggering precise weapons fire. The Void Hunters, ancient beyond measure, encountered something they had never seen in all their eons of existence, a species that turned its entire culture into a combat system while simultaneously refusing to let combat define its culture. Third movement beginning, Rashid called out. Engineering reports the garden's quantum-entangled roses are blooming in response to the battle harmonics. Their pattern is generating new shield frequencies. The Nightweaver's response to the void attacks became increasingly complex. Children's artwork hanging in corridors revealed itself to contain advanced quantum calculations. The ship's hydroponics bay reconfigured itself into a three-dimensional tactical display. Even the civilian scientists continued their research mid-battle, each discovery immediately incorporated into the ship's combat systems. Deploy the Beethoven Squadron, Blackwood commanded. Full orchestral support. Small craft launched from the Nightweaver's bays, each one piloted by a crew member who was simultaneously a warrior and artist. They moved in formations that corresponded to musical phrases, their attack patterns following the structure of a symphony. The Void Hunters, for the first time in their ancient existence, began to retreat. Their attempts to predict human tactics failed because each human action was both logical and creative, both practiced and improvised. The children's quantum art class wants to try something, Rashid reported, a note of pride in his voice. They've composed a new piece they call Void Hunter's Lament. Blackwood's smile held centuries of human innovation. Let them perform. The ship's main concert hall, converted into an auxiliary combat control center, filled with the sound of children's voices raised in song. But this was no ordinary performance. Each note, each harmony, carried precisely calculated quantum frequencies that began to unravel the very fabric of the Void Hunters' dimensional technology. They're not just fighting, Ambassador Nixis realized, her crystalline form vibrating with dawning understanding. They're teaching. Every action is both combat and education, both defense and cultural expression. The Nightweaver's transformation continued, each system revealing new layers of integration between civilian life and military capability. The ship wasn't just a vessel of war, it was a testament to humanity's refusal to be bound by conventional limitations. As the battle reached its crescendo, with void weapons meeting poetry-powered shields and children's art generating combat solutions, the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations finally understood. They weren't witnessing the future of warfare. They were witnessing the future of civilization itself. The Void Hunters never stood a chance, not against weapons or technology, but against humanity's greatest innovation, the ability to make every aspect of their existence serve multiple harmonious purposes, turning even combat into an expression of life rather than death. Evolution's edge. In the battle's aftermath, the Concordat station hummed with unprecedented activity. The Void Hunters had retreated to whatever dimension they called home, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by humanity's display of integrated warfare and cultural expression. Fascinating, Professor Kvex of the Quantum Collective observed, their probability cloud expanding to encompass new possibilities. The human children are already incorporating the void energy patterns into their artwork. They gestured toward a growing exhibition where young humans displayed paintings that somehow captured five-dimensional space on two-dimensional surfaces. Captain Blackwood stood at the center of the station's grand observatory, the Nightweaver visible through the massive windows behind her, its hull still shifting with patterns that were equal parts art and advanced technology. We've received 17 requests from various species to establish cultural exchange programs, she announced to the assembled dignitaries. Particularly interesting is the number of military academies wanting to incorporate arts education. High Admiral Vorthax's scales rippled with satisfaction. Perhaps now you understand why I've spent 3 centuries advocating for closer cooperation with humanity. They don't just advance, they transform the very nature of advancement itself. Ambassador Nixus, her crystalline form now structured in a pattern that mimicked human artistic designs, spoke with newfound humility. We thought we had achieved the peak of civilization by separating warfare from culture, military from civilian life. We were wrong. The humans haven't just bridged these divisions, they've proven such divisions were artificial to begin with. Throughout the station, the impact of the battle continued to ripple outward. The Luminary had already begun modifying their educational systems to incorporate human-style integration. The Silicon Consciousness was redesigning their ships to include spaces for art and cultural expression. Even the traditionally rigid Quantum Collective was exploring ways to incorporate uncertainty and creativity into their probability matrices. Lieutenant Commander Rashid, Blackwood called through her neural link, "How are our youngest crew members processing the experience?" "Remarkably well, Captain," came the reply. "The kindergarten class has developed a new form of quantum mathematics based on their observations of the Void Hunters' dimensional shifts. They're expressing it through interpretive dance, of course." The gathered representatives watched in amazement as a holographic display showed human children performing movements that somehow mapped perfectly onto advanced space-time equations. Their dance was simultaneously a physics lecture, a military analysis, and a pure expression of joy. "This is what we've been missing," the Quantum Collective's representative realized. "We've been advancing in straight lines, pursuing either military power or cultural achievement, science or art. The humans advance in all directions simultaneously, each aspect strengthening the others." Professor Kvex's probability cloud pulsed with sudden insight. It's not just their technology or their methods. It's their fundamental understanding of existence. They don't see barriers between disciplines because they've recognized that all aspects of life are interconnected. The Nightweaver's garden sections were visible through the station's windows, the plants still pulsing with bioluminescence as they processed battle data. Children played among quantum computers disguised as playground equipment, their games unconsciously solving complex tactical equations. The ship's orchestra practiced in a chamber that doubled as a shield harmonics laboratory, each note contributing to both art and defense. "We're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy," Rashid reported. "The battle footage has sparked what some are calling a cultural revolution. The Arcturus Academy of Military Science is merging with the Centauri Institute of Fine Arts. The Rigel Defense Force is establishing its first poetry department." Captain Blackwood smiled, but her expression held a depth of understanding that spoke to humanity's long journey to this point. "Change was inevitable," she said. "We simply showed one possible path forward." Each species must find its own way to integrate rather than divide, to create rather than merely destroy. And the Void Hunters? Ambassador Nixis asked, her crystalline form shimmering with concern. They'll return, Blackwood acknowledged. But when they do, they won't face isolated civilizations bound by artificial limitations. They'll face a galaxy that has learned to use every aspect of existence in harmony. Our children's art will be our shields, our music will be our weapons, and our creativity will be our strongest defense. High Admiral Vorthax's scales displayed a pattern that had no direct translation in any known language, but somehow conveyed both hope and certainty. This is how evolution should work, he declared, not through the elimination of differences, but through their integration into something greater. As if to emphasize his words, the Night Weaver began what appeared to be a routine system diagnostic. But to the watching delegates, it was also a dance, a symphony, a mathematical proof, and a work of art. All at once, all in perfect harmony. The galaxy would never be the same. But then, as humanity had proven, staying the same was never the point. The true purpose of existence was to grow, to create, to transform, and to do it all while singing, dancing, and reaching for the stars. In the ship's primary school classroom, a young girl completed a painting of the battle. Hidden in her artwork were calculations that would revolutionize dimensional physics. She didn't know this yet. She was simply creating, simply expressing, simply being human. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all.